Hello, fellow project managers. Thank you for coming. My name is Rhodes, and I'm here to talk about my project management experience on the SIS implementation project. This was a huge project with a lot of benefits for the university, and also a lot of challenges from a project management perspective. We started off this project as an agile project, as a waterfall project, and the methodology evolved, our project management methodology evolved. Started waterfall, went to agile scrum, and ended up in a Kanban-like methodology, which you'll find out as we go through. So, thank you again for coming. We'll go ahead and get started. You all set? Mm-hmm. So, agenda for today is I'm going to talk about a little bit about the background of the project, what the vision of the project was. There's a lot of ways to talk about this project from a functional perspective, a technical perspective. It's been talked about a lot around the university. I'm talking more from a project management perspective than anything else. So if you have specific questions about how the functionality works, I'll have to refer you to someone else because I was the project manager. I'll talk about the journey, as I alluded to, how we changed methodologies as we went along, and the struggles that we faced, the challenges, and how we came through. Can everyone hear me? Okay. And what are the key takeaways for project managers? Again, we're going to focus mostly from a project management perspective. So, the project was, actually I'm going to go to the vision slide first. What the project was implementing a new student information system for the university. We had to do it in phases because the university is so big. And our vision was to, as you can read there, adopt a modern, secure, flexible, and intuitive student information technology platform that provided an excellent user experience, supports the unique requirements of the schools, as we know, we're all snowflakes, and facilitates access to integrated student and course data. So schools wanted to see data across schools. Oh, isn't this public speaking 101? And I'm not going to go through all of the objectives and guiding principles of the project. I think a lot of you are familiar with these, unless you want me to. So why did we do the project? The project emerged from a planning effort in 2012 that said as soon as possible we have to replace FAS and central admin systems and then onboard other schools over time. So we wanted to start with FAS, GSAS, and Divinity, and then expand beyond there to the other schools, which is what we did. There were three main objectives that we were trying to deal with, or problems we were trying to deal with: technical debt, a lot of aging, inflexible programs and systems. We had some service deficiencies. A lot of the work that was done to get students enrolled in classes, to set up the catalog and things like that was very labor intensive. And it didn't meet the expectations of the faculty, the students, and the department. They were our main customers. We also wanted to support the my.Harvard vision at the time and make it easier for students and faculty to engage across the schools. So I'm going to talk about our project management journey in terms of Bruce Tuckman's stages of team development. We thought it was appropriate to kind of explain how we went through the process. We had forming and then storming, and then in our case some more forming and storming. So we iterated through forming and storming a little bit, and then we got into norming and performing. And most people familiar with this? Okay. So, as I mentioned, we started with a waterfall methodology. So our vendor, this project was very big, there were about 60 people on it, and half of them were from our vendor, Sierra Cedar, and the other half were from Harvard. So our vendor brought in their own methodology, an ERP methodology, because that was what we were doing. We were implementing an ERP system. And their system was kind of an iterative waterfall system. They had some interactive design sessions at the beginning, where they brought all the schools into a room, and they started to talk about their requirements. And they were trying to gather requirements and train everyone at the same time. And the problem with that approach is it assumes that adoption is accepted, but in our case it wasn't. So the schools wanted to tell us individually what their concerns were. They weren't interested in adopting something without telling them exactly how they wanted to adopt it. So the whole IDP methodology failed for us, which was one of the reasons we had to move into an agile approach. The other aspects of their methodology were the gaps and customizations. Once they came out, followed the waterfall. Another big problem we had with that approach was we didn't dive deep enough into the requirements, and so we ended up, even after the planning phase, still having to do planning when we're supposed to be implementing. So that's where we were at the end of their IDP phase. Our implementation plan at the highest level, we had 3 waves. That third line should say wave 2, sorry. The first wave was student financials in March of 2015. Wave 1, we called it wave 0 because we were going to do wave 1 and wave 0 together, but then we decided to break it out, so we ended up with a wave 0. FAS, GSAS, and Divinity went live September of 2015, and then in wave 2, Kennedy, Design, Education, and Harvard Chan went in September of 2016. This is a detailed timeline. I'm bringing this up only to show you, give you an idea of how much scope there was on this project. We announced the program in 2013. We did some foundational design, as I said, but we had new admits, we had bio demo. Does everyone know what new admits is? Admissions, we had admissions, people coming in, new students. We had to implement that. We had to implement bio demo, which is to keep track of everyone's geographic and personal information. We also had student financials, so everything to do with student bills. We had to implement that, replace that entire system. We had to retire the SIS mainframe. We had curriculum management. We had to put in course search, which was huge. The advising portal, then self-service, enrollment, grading, and then we had to do it all over again for the other schools. So it was a huge amount of work going on. So why Agile? So as I said, we started off with waterfall. We fell down on waterfall almost immediately, as you saw. I did write a project plan the first day I arrived, and about a month later, 2 months later, we abandoned the project plan and decided to go agile because of the drawbacks we were seeing with the waterfall approach from the vendor. And we also had HUIT management that was asking us to do agile. And so the entire project had to shift to agile. We decided to do it, but it was rocky. Jason Schaffner, whom everyone knows, what are the... No, it's not Jason.
It's lovely though.
This is tomorrow's personal email. Maybe you should have said something like So Jason had to explain to the vendors and to me, who came from a waterfall background, why are we going to do Agile? This is not a software development project. So I and the vendor, who had always implemented their systems at many different institutions in a waterfall methodology, had a lot of questions about why we're going to do Agile and how is it going to work, and this makes no sense. And I had just gotten my PMP not too, about a few years earlier. So here's what he had to say. While this approach is unorthodox for PeopleSoft, we believe it's the right model for this project. Here's why. We're gonna overcome the disadvantages of the inadequate scope definition that we talked about from their IDP sessions. We wanted to phase out the program, so we figured this was the best way to do it. We also wanted to, this is one of the big reasons, we wanted to have an agile foundation so that when we went live and we got closer to live, that we could do quick iterations and get a lot of work, so little pieces of work done in quick fashion, you get in front of the customers quickly. We also felt that it was a better fit for business intelligence because we were putting in a data warehouse and data mining operation at the same time as we were doing this. We already talked about phase development. And we felt that would reduce all the normal risks from waterfall, which are identifying your requirements way too early and having them change by the time you go live. So, we only had 2 out of 60 people on the team who knew about Agile. There were 2 PMs on the project, myself, and there was a vendor PM also from Sierra Cedar. And they said, everyone go to training and learn how to be Agile. So, what we learned while we were there was, what I learned was there's no PM role. So all of my work would be done by everybody else on the team. Okay? The teams would need to be self-managing. And we also learned about all the different roles, product owner, scrum master, team members. We learned about all the events and we learned about all the nomenclature. And then we went forth and were told to be agile. And I see there's a few people from the team, so you know I'm telling the truth. So, we went forth and we did not become agile overnight, as you probably suspect. The first thing we did though was we formed into agile teams based largely on functional areas. The project had already been divided by functional area because the ERP system is divided into functional modules, which makes sense. Student financials, student records, advising, data, to keep track of personal data. So we aligned our teams along the same lines. I became a Scrum Master overnight. We also had a PMO on the project, a Program Management Office, of which I was a part, which helped to keep, steering the boat in one direction. Well, we went in many directions, but we kept afloat at least. We had a large technical team also, and that was focused largely on operations and infrastructure. I keep hitting the wrong keyboard. So this is a subset of the teams. We had about 9 agile teams on the project. This is an example of some of them. We lined up, gave ourselves colors. Green was for financials, perfect color for financials. Blue was for, student data, things like that. Each team had a product owner and a Scrum Master. So everyone in the Scrum Master column had never been a Scrum Master before. Everyone in the product owner column had never been a product owner before. On this sheet, you see the name Jill. She actually came later. She was our Scrum coach. But initially, nobody had ever filled these roles before. So our coach we didn't actually have a coach, but our trainer would come back about every 3 weeks and have another half-an-hour session with us, and we would ask questions. But we were falling down all over the place with trying to go agile. We read the books and everything, but still trying to do it was really hard. 9 teams, these were pretty big teams too. Some of them had only 3 people, but some of them had, we know we're only supposed to have 9, but a couple of them had 10. Okay, so we went through a lot of storming. As I said, we had a lot of resistance to becoming agile. I was one of the people. We had some vendor consultants that were very, very verbal against agile, and they were constantly complaining about it all the time and kept their own project plans in some cases. I was trying to, be positive about the whole agile approach, and so I kept an open mind, and our managing director, kept telling us, we can do it, if it doesn't work, we can change it, don't worry, just keep at it. So we did. The self-managing team aspect gave us a little bit of trouble. Each team, we didn't want to tell people what to do. That was the main thing they told me as a project manager. You can't be telling people how to do their job anymore, or checking on them or any of that. So they have to manage themselves. And so what we had out of the 9 teams, not all of the teams were great self-managed teams. So that was something that we really struggled with. What do you do if the team isn't self-managing itself? Some of the things we did was we managed them a little more closely than we probably should have. Or we tried a different approach, maybe not Scrum, maybe we'll do Kanban instead. So some of them had to be a little more closely managed, even though we knew that was against the Agile way. Everyone was on a different cadence because everyone was, allowed to do, I shouldn't say allowed, but chose to do things their own way. So we had several definitions of done. We had no shared sprint reviews. There was no communication across the teams. They became very siloed. And dependencies across the teams weren't managed well. So this is all during our storming phase. We also had some storming as it related to outside of the team, interacting with our product owners. We had a huge group of stakeholders for this first wave 1. FAS, as you know, has 49 departments, and in some cases they wanted to come to consensus on how the system was implemented. So you can imagine that decision-making was very time-consuming. And our sprints at the time, I think, were 4 weeks, some of them. And we had decisions that needed to be made that spanned longer than 4 weeks. So we struggled with that. Even though we were trying to break the work down into work that could be done within a sprint, there was some work that just couldn't be done within a sprint. We also had all types of customers. We had some customers who wanted us to do everything for them, and then we had other customers who wanted to do everything themselves and wanted to learn everything. I see Susan there, you're in the latter category, thank you. One thing we noticed also with our customers in our storming was that we didn't really talk to them before we shifted to Agile from a waterfall approach. So during the entire planning phase, FAS saw project plans. I think Divinity probably saw them too. And then behind the scenes, we shifted to Agile, but we never told the customer about that. And so for them, the concept of MVP, minimum viable product, was something they struggled to accept. Because of course they want everything. And they want everything on the day that they go live. So what we had to help them learn was, you can't have everything. Let's prioritize what's the most important to you, what's the most valuable to your school and to your constituents, your faculty, and your students. And we were able to resolve that tension, but it took a long time. Luckily, it was a long project. How are we doing on time? How's the cadence, okay? Okay, so, because we were struggling so much with the Agile adoption, we decided, I lobbied for quite a long time for an Agile coach. I said, really, if we had someone here who knew Agile, what it was really about, what the spirit of Agile was, that was the hardest thing for me to come to terms with is, what is the Agile way? I really didn't know. I just had a few hours of training. And we were reading the books and we were doing well with the events and doing stand-ups and grooming and all of that. But a lot of times we didn't really get it, So we finally, after a lot of lobbying, got an Agile coach, a full-time Agile coach on the project. Her name was Jill. And she came in and she looked at what we were doing. She watched our stand-up, she came to our grooming sessions, she came to our lessons learned, our retrospectives, and she really, really helped us over the rough patches. And I don't think that we could have been successful in an agile mode, especially coming from so much, so many waterfall people on the project, to get us over that hump and really thinking agile without her. And I think we waited a little bit too long to bring her, but when she did finally show up, at least I, for one, was able to see the value of agile and why it was important, and how to actually make it work. It's easy to see the value when you see the vision and the manifesto and all of that. Sounds great, but trying to make it happen with a huge team like that, it was really hard to do. So some of the things we fixed during the norming stage is we got onto a unified cadence, so all 9 teams, finally, all the same cadence, a 3-week cadence. We came up with a single definition of done. There were some little changes here and there depending on the type of story, but largely we came to a consensus as this is really what done means. We had what we called cross-functional team meetings, which is like a scrum model to align the teams and try to identify issues that affected all teams. There were plenty of those. And there were a lot of times when one team was waiting for another team, but there was no visibility to what was going on in one team. So we fixed that by getting the teams to talk to each other. And again, what I say here is I wish we'd done this sooner, but that's what we always say. One thing we also did outside of the team for norming was we had Mike Burke, the registrar of FAS, and our managing director, Jason Schaffner, were awesome. They went out and did what they called a lot of road shows about the new system. They were constantly out visiting all of the departments in FAS, visiting Divinity, even going to the second wave schools and talking about this project and getting people to understand what is the project about, showing them what we were doing, because it was hard to see in advance because it was a PeopleSoft project that we were putting a new skin on it, so a whole new face on it with another vendor called Intracy to try to make PeopleSoft look pretty, because you've all seen PeopleSoft when you're doing your payroll, you're looking at your paycheck or whatever. It's not a user-friendly interface, so we built a pretty one on there. So they were always out showing it, but they had to show it on screens for a long time because we were developing it. But they did a great job at doing that. So without them, I'm not sure our adoption rate would have been where we wanted it to be. We also had an executive committee on the project made up of the CIO and some of the heads and deans of the schools, some faculty that we met with on a monthly basis. And Jason and I would put together a huge dashboard with colors on it and pretty pictures talking about the project. And they would help us to resolve any issues that we couldn't resolve on our own. And a lot of our issues were related to trying to get consensus across FAS. For the registrars, luckily Mike Burke's a central registrar, so that function is centralized, but some of the other functions are not. So it was important to have the executive committee to help us with those decisions that crossed boundaries. One of the things we started to do is we started to meet more with our customers. We had the monthly sprint reviews. Now that all the teams were in alignment and the cadence, same cadence, we could have a monthly sprint review, and that was great. So we would have all the different teams at different time slots during the day. We'd advise advertise these in advance, and people who were interested in student records could come and see student records from 11 to 12, let's say. But if they were only interested in advising, they could come at 3 to 4 and watch advising. But it was once a month. I knew it was going to come. It was a beautiful setting that we had with lots of monitors and things like that. So people really enjoyed it. And it helped to give communication about the project, and it helped to get adoption and acceptance of the project, and review what we had done. We had a quality assurance, agile quality assurance trainer come in and helped us to improve our acceptance criteria. We added some personas, for example. Some of us use what we call the given, then, when statements to have some standardization amongst our acceptance criteria. That wasn't widely accepted across all the teams, but it was there if people wanted to use it. One of the other big things we did during this phase for norming was got us all talking about the same thing. We branded the project as my.Harvard because there was a lot of confusion about what a CIS project was, because CIS was the old system. It was actually the name of the system, I think, that we replaced. Is that right, Mark? Yeah.
That's
And
the
so-
main credit system, right? The only system they talk about.
Yeah. And so we had to, we didn't want to be CIS, we didn't want to be ISIS. So we had to come up with a name, and I'm not sure who we can give credit to for this, but we came up with my.Harvard, which actually I think was already being used by someone else, and we had to negotiate with them. Okay, so I think we're at a break.
Okay. So we're gonna take a little stretch for everybody, you know, as part of, like, I'm Tamara Larson, I'm one of the PMC steering committee members. And as part of all of our PM events, we always try and build a community. So now everybody up, and we're gonna have a community building, collaborate, getting to know people. And I'd like everybody, we're gonna spend 10 minutes doing this. I'm gonna get that. If everybody can come down here, we're gonna do PM, COP speed dating. I'm not gonna ask who's ever done this before. 2 lines, please, one here, one there. Facing each other. Make sure you're lined up with someone. You can kind of come around the table. Wait till everybody's in line. Alrighty. So what I'd like everybody to do, I'm going to give you 2 minutes. This is speed dating. You're welcome to take a step closer, introduce yourselves to each other if you already know each other, just update what you've been working on lately. And after 2 minutes, I'm going to say bing. The people down here will go to the, just this side will move. So Shannon, you'll go next to Gretchen, and everybody else will take a step, 2 steps to the
So
left.
only us, this line.
Only
will
that
to the
side.
left.
Yep,
You guys stay where you are.
exactly.
Okay, all right.
Okay? Go.
Hey, Todd.
Was we were in norming of wave 1. Finally started to come together as teams. Then we got into performing. So this took us a long time. I would say it took at least 6 months, maybe a year, before we felt, once we started up with the Agile methodology, before we actually felt like we were performing well from an Agile perspective. And of course, some teams were more Agile than others. Some teams were stronger than others. The teams who had Jill, the Agile coach as their Scrum Master, they were doing really well. And then we had a couple of teams who came in, as I said, there were 2 folks on the whole team who knew Agile, and so their teams, were doing well. And they helped the rest of us to learn Agile and become more Agile. We were all co-located in one location, by the way, which really helped, and we were able to see our boards, our physical boards. We also had electronic boards on Jira that we started to use also. As I mentioned, the Agile coach was a big help. Can't say enough about that. We still had some things we wanted to work on, even though we were at a point where we felt we were performing well. All the different teams used the Fibonacci method, but the different story points meant different things to different teams. A 3 to 1 team was not the same as a 3 on another team. So we weren't able to have unified backlog reports coming out. We had to have burn downs, we had to use individual burn downs. And then, we just had so much work to do. We had a very complex environment. We were using a process we didn't understand. We got the late documentation of requirements. As I said, our planning phase didn't go deep enough. We had struggled so much with the cross-team dependencies that we ended up, before that first go live in fall of 2015, working all summer long, every weekend, long nights, and all this points to bring your coach in sooner, try to, I would say don't shift gears unless you really have to. In this case, I think it was the right thing to do for us. We just wish we'd done it sooner. We also did some improvement of our QA and release processes. Traditionally, as a traditionalist, I was flabbergasted when they said they wanted to start doing releases on a daily basis. I was used to, once a year, once every 2 years. During that summer, we were actually doing releases every day. And we were able to do that, because we documented our release plan very well. We implemented FIRE. Has anyone heard of FIRE? Yeah, I would say it's less cumbersome than some others, and it helped us to speed up our process and make it very customized to what we want to do. And we were able to implement different release cycles depending on the type of release you were doing. If it was data conversion or customization or back-end data change, you didn't have to follow the same exact number of steps for each type. We also hired a dedicated release manager. And in the end, we ended up with about 2 releases a week, and that's the release schedule even now is 2 releases a week, which made the customers very happy and were able to deal with bugs, quickly. For our QA process, we had to define a QA process that was, aligned to the shorter release cycle. We made sure that we had test cases we bought, Zephyr, which is a plug-in to Jira. I think now it's actually coming bundled with Jira, but it allows you, if you haven't tried it yet, it allows you to create test cases and tie them right to your Jira ticket, which is really nice. You can have different iterations of the same test. One thing we weren't able to ever get to was automated testing. We really would like to have gotten there, but our product was never stable enough. We didn't feel that we could get to automated testing. So that was the end of wave 1. So FAS Divinity and GSES all went live. It was bumpy, we had a little bit of a bumpy road, but all the students were able to enroll in the fall of 2015. Then we get into wave 2. So in wave 2, we had to bring in 4 new schools. Now remember, we've got FAS that just went live, yesterday, and Divinity just went live yesterday, but we're going to start implementing these 4 new schools, and they have to all be live and able to enroll by September of 2016. So actually August in some cases. So I'm not going to read all the details here, but here are our 4 schools: the Graduate School of Education, Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, the Graduate School of Design, and the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Now the thing that's important here is that these schools were implementing additional functionality. They weren't just implementing things the way FAS did them. They wanted to do things their own way. So you can see in here, for example, education has a 2-day shopping period. Can you read that? Yeah. That they wanted to implement. Graduate School of Design does a lottery for their limited enrollment. We had to develop a whole entire custom solution for that. Harvard T.H. Chan was just huge. They had pre-registration, which none of the other schools had. And some very granular seating reservations. And Kennedy schools did waitlisting for their students, and they also had a flight plan. So all of these things were huge customizations, all like 4 big customizations at least, and some of the schools had 2, to develop, plus implement the student system, plus support the old system. So it was a lot of work to do. And now the schools, all of them, wanted a project plan. Now here we were, finally, I'm like, okay, I'll do Agile. I think it makes sense. I think it's made sense. We wouldn't have been able to go to multiple releases a week if we weren't Agile, But now the schools want a project plan. So I had to go ahead and build project plans for all the schools. So I met with the experts on the functional side and reused some of the plans that I had from wave 1 and edited them a little bit and customized them for each school. So we had 1,000 little project plans for each school. This of course created tension on the teams because a lot of the team, here we are Agile, why do we gotta do waterfall? There was a lot of tension on the team about this. We also had,
Was there any pushback from your team leadership to the schools to say we have different ways of getting that kind of information, this is not how we work?
Yes, Jason met with all the schools about that, and they were just very insistent on it. And we tried. We even went to executive committee, but they insisted.
Wow.
In the end, as we'll see, they pretty much abandoned the plans after a while. Because we also had, milestone charts that we gave them, and based on their business calendars, because each school has a different business calendar to some degree. Things are happening around the same time, but not on the exact same date. One big thing that we did, which is probably why they finally got rid of the project plans, was we came up with, and I can't actually identify whose idea this was now in retrospect, but we came up with what we called a unified technical backlog. So across all the schools, now FAS was live, the new schools that are coming on, Divinity that was live, we wanted to create one backlog for our technical team to go to get the work to do. So we took all the requests, put them in one backlog, and rank ordered them by value to the customer. And so we had to have, obviously, weekly meetings across all the teams for people to advocate for what they felt was their highest priority. And we maintain this, I'm not on the project anymore, but we still maintain this approach, which is now we've gone from waterfall to Scrum to Kanban, basically now, for the technical side. And we had to reorganize the team. We actually decided to reorganize the team at the same time. We were based around a functional model, as I showed you. We decided to change it to be based around schools, so that each school had its own team. And we did pairing, which is an agile concept to some degree. We paired a vendor and a Harvard person, so we still had the huge team. Even though we were supposed to be scaling back based on the budget, we actually didn't until later. We had a vendor functional lead, a Harvard functional lead, a VA, tech lead, data conversion lead, and a project manager / swim master. We still kept the overall program management office, so I was still the project manager or agile project manager over the whole, my title changed a little bit over the whole project. We also created an operations team to address the production issue, an operations team to address production issues, because again, we were in production. What's the matter?
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So, how did it work having teams by school, but a unified backlog where you're picking the highest value across the schools?
So we had to meet, let's say, you were from Chan School, and Randy, you're from FAS, and Susan, you're from Divinity. Your representatives, your functional leads were in the room every week looking at the backlog and prioritizing it. So in order for a story even to get onto the part of the backlog we would prioritize it, it had to have good acceptance criteria, it had to be nice and thorough, it had to have been sized by a technical person. And then once it had all those criteria, go into this weekly prioritization meeting, and you would be advocating for your work, and Susan would be advocating for hers, her representative would be in some of the interviews.
But if I have a team that's doing development, the teams by school, were they doing development for that school?
No, there's
Or they were
no
doing
technical
development
person on
Okay.
this, so I guess that's a good question, because beside this, these are all functional folks largely, except for the data conversion piece. There's a whole team of developers off to the side who are doing the development work.
Okay.
Make sense?
Follow up.
Yeah.
That's quite an interesting question, because who facilitated that meeting, and how did the customers do, or the partners do in, being gracious of understanding other schools' needs as well as their own?
It was contentious at first, but what we saw was the model worked well, and developers were picking up work from the top of the backlog, even if it was out of their wheelhouse a little bit. So we got a little bit of an added benefit where we got some knowledge transfer and a more robust technical team at the end of it. But yeah, it was contentious at first. But, a lot of times it came down to, well, your story's really not ready. Whereas you don't even have any acceptance criteria here. As a technical person looked at this. So it actually was a good thing because it got people to do a better job, more thorough job running the stories.
So was there still multiple Scrum teams separate from these teams?
No.
Or just one giant technical?
One giant technical pool.
How many people were in that pool?
Probably 15,
Okay.
maybe more.
And still doing 3-week sprints? Or
No,
was it Kanban? by then?
sprints were gone.
Sprints were gone, now it's
Mhm.
Kanban. Okay.
Any other questions? So, we still struggled in wave 2. As I mentioned, our budget anticipated a drop off in resources after wave 1. However, there was a lot of effort for wave 2, as I mentioned, a lot of customizations, and it was actually more than we thought it was going to be. We also had a lot of work that was deferred from wave 1. One thing I didn't mention is that we moved to the cloud in the middle of wave 1, which caused, some headaches for us, and some work was deferred from wave 1. But it was only deferred, it wasn't taken off the plate completely. So we were also, as I said, in operational mode. So what we realized was, our staffing plan was inadequate. So that was during our storming phase. We had to scramble with the budget to try to get vendors, and consultants extended. We tried to pare back on requirements and scope, as much as we could. We did have the backlog, which facilitated that. So in Agile, one thing I learned is, it's a good thing because the most important work is being done. The other work is still visible to the customer, and they can see that it's there, it's going to get done, it just may not get done tomorrow. And in wave 2, we got to norming and performing a lot quicker. Even though we did switch the types of teams we were working on, we're actually moving back to sort of what our original teams were like. So it seemed to be a lot smoother transition than the first initial transition from waterfall to Agile. As I said, the unified technical backlog concept worked very well. And the weekly prioritization meetings became more effective as time went on. At first they were bumpy. The disconnects between the teams got better because we were all in the same room once a week. Everyone showed up to this meeting because they knew that if they didn't, then their stories might not get picked up or they may not be prioritized. So a lot of these things, these accidents happened that were really good accidents for the project. In the second phase, we also created a formal communication plan for each school. We had someone who was dedicated to communications, and she met with the schools and built a communication plan and then executed against that plan. And as I said, the project plans were largely abandoned by the schools when they saw that their work was getting done. They could see that they had visibility into JIRA, they could see the backlog and see that their work was getting done. And this summer, that second summer was very busy, but it wasn't overwhelming like the first summer, so it was smoother. And the go lives actually went much smoother than we kind of expected the worst based on 2015, but it actually went very smoothly. So now we're in operations mode. All the schools were live in fall of 2016. We have a few additional schools that will interface with the system, but they're not going to implement PeopleSoft. Now we have a drastically smaller team. I'm actually no longer on the project. The house is built, so I can move on. The technical backlog, unified technical backlog, was so popular that we decided to do it for functional work as well. So we built one unified, we now have one unified functional backlog and one unified technical backlog, and we follow the same exact model. Where BAs are picking up work, sometimes outside their wheelhouse. At the end of wave 1, we had a lot of people who knew student records but didn't know advising, for example, or folks who know data warehouse but don't know student records. And so now it's giving folks a chance to become cross-pollinated, cross-trained in the different areas slowly. My new job at the end of the project was an Agile facilitator. We tried to keep work in progress to a minimum, which was hard to do. A lot of times folks would have, 9 things they're doing at once, and Jira gives you pretty pictures and graphs that pop right out and tell you who your folks are who are working on too many things at once. You want to keep work in progress to a minimum when you're doing a Kanban. So I was encouraging folks to finish things before starting something new. I also led the team stand-ups. We did those, still doing those once a week, and we also had our weekly meetings to share issues and increase communication. We had kind of a scrum of scrum models that we did in addition to the project prioritization meetings. So the summary takeaways for PMs are, if it's not working, bring in help early in the process, as early as you can. Get a coach and have that person join your team. Understand your customers. At some point, our product owners were a little bit disconnected from our customers, and we found that the product owners who were most connected with their customers were the most successful. And what we learned was, change takes time. You have to expect that you're going to take sometimes 2 steps forward and 1 step back. but you're going to make progress. And in the end, Agile was the way to go for us. I had to be flexible, the team had to be flexible, and our customers had to be flexible. As on every project, executive support is key, and stakeholder support is key. And planning and alignment are not something alien to Agile. We can have planning and alignment, even though our teacher told us otherwise at the beginning. It is important. In the end, this was a huge project that was very valuable to the university, presented a lot of project management challenges for us, but it was a huge success in the end. All of the schools who opted in did go live on time, and we did come in on budget. And it was a windy road with a lot of twists and turns, but we did make it to the finish line. And as Michael Burke always says, this isn't the finish line, this is the starting line. And, our backlogs runneth over. Thank you.
Question about prioritization and governance and operations mode. How are the schools engaged with that, the communication with them?
In operational mode. I think what they're doing is they're actually having a meeting with all of the schools on a regular basis, right? Integrated meetings with the schools? Yeah, once a week. Once a week.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about your Scrum models? So how do you get all those individual teams, color-coded teams, and what was the color-coded team made up of? Was it functional and technical? And then how did you coordinate it amongst all of these?
So originally the Scrum teams did have technical developers on them, BAs, functional lead, a product owner, the Scrum Master, and then the development team was made up of BAs who functioned as QA people, and also developers assigned to each individual team. And we didn't coordinate well across the team. That was our problem. And so we found that the blue team was waiting for the red team in some cases to do something. But the red team didn't know that the blue team was waiting for them. We just kind of found out through the grapevine. So that's when we implemented a meeting where we could have all of the product owners and all of the Scrum Masters from all the Scrum teams meet together on a regular basis. It was a big group, but we kept a list of what our issues were that tracked across all teams, and that helped to facilitate the communication. Does that answer your question?
Yes, but I still, I've been on people's projects before many times. It's just mind-boggling to this. Because when you don't know, especially if it's a time-constrained project with this many people and funding sources, which are time limited, which have parameters already structured around them, they go to a model which does not have as much structure. It's just like, how do you do that?
Yeah, we struggled. We did. We struggled. And I think eventually we pulled all, I think that's one of the reasons we eventually pulled all the developers into one team, so that they were talking to each other. Because in some cases, one team was, especially when we got to the school model team, one team was designing something one way, and another school was designing the same thing a different way. So that's when we said, oh, we can't be doing that.
And then just to follow up, so do you think the Javelin was a success because then if schools didn't buy, and then you had to go back? I know there's other factors not in your control, but overall, it feels like you started with something you didn't plan for, you had some success around it, you went back to what you started, and that continued for a little bit because of other factors. So, what is your impression?
That was Agile a successful project? I would say yes, because I don't think we could be at the point we are now where we're doing regular releases, 2 releases a week, without an Agile mindset.
But then the schools who adopted waterfall still were on stage too, right?
They
met their-
came around eventually. Because they could see their work in the background. The main thing they wanted to see was, is my work getting done? And is it gonna be done by the time I need it to be done? I mean, they would like to have been promised ahead of time that I'm gonna get all 10 of these things on this date. And in the end, they didn't get all 10 of those things on that date. But they got 10 things that they wanted, right? And they might not have been the same 10 things they wanted at the beginning. So, they were happy. Susan?
How did you find your agile coach?
How did we find our agile coach? That's a good question. Because we didn't use the people who trained us, we used a different company. It must have been word of mouth or something, but I can talk to you about who it was, or what company it was that you want afterwards. Yeah, we did not use the company that trained us. And that was actually a good thing, because we were listening, hanging on to every word that our trainer told us, because it was our only real source of information about what Agile was. But what we found out when we talked to another coach was, that was his perspective on Agile, but she had a different perspective, and now that I'm part of the Agile working group, I hear even other perspectives, so. It's not, it's very strict. Right, Mara, you want to add?
If you're looking for an agile coach, I mean, if you're in HUIT, I'm one of the agile coaches.
Oh, yeah, there's one.
Another one. For non-HUIT folks, we can help you. We don't have bandwidth to coach for the entire university, but we can certainly help work with you if you need some guidance on that. And we've done that with a number of different areas. So reach out to me.
Other questions? Jay?
I'm just curious about you personally, making that transition from PM to Agile facilitator. Like, what were some of the good things, what were some of the real challenges for you to make that switch kind of on the fly?
Yeah, my biggest challenge was not being able to guarantee that everything was gonna get done. That was my biggest struggle, understanding MVP. So one of the things that our customers struggle with is understanding MVP. And that was my biggest challenge, because I'm used to planning it all out, and these are all the resources I'm gonna need, these are all the people I'm gonna need, this is what I'm gonna be able to deliver, and I'm gonna be able to guarantee that. So it wasn't until I got to see like the velocity coming out of the burn down, and I could kind of estimate, how much work we could get done in a specific amount of time. But really accepting the changes in scope that kind of swung based on what the customer needed at the time. In the end, obviously on paper that sounds great, right? The customer's going to get everything they need. I think one of our biggest challenges I talked about was the communication across teams, and that's only there for scaled Agile. You see it in the documentation, communicating across teams is important, having a project plan, maybe not a project plan, but some kind of release plan, which is something we did develop. As long as I could see some kind of a plan, even if we didn't call it a project plan, I was able to accept it. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Did any two schools ever feel that their work was really important and urgent? Did you ever have such a condition?
No. No. Well, we had, in the first phase, we had FAS, which is, paying the bills, they're paying the largest amount of the budget. They have the largest amount of students, and so they wanted, they had a lot of demands on the project. But we also had a divinity school who was going live at the same time. So there was some struggles there, but I think we did a good job of keeping divinity's needs in the forefront. It helped that Susan was always there at the sprint reviews and being a very active member. You definitely have to say what you want. You know, you have to have representation at those prioritization meetings, or, you know, it's not going to be prioritized. That answer your question? Any other questions? I hope you found this helpful. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Randy.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Tamara, for writing most of the presentation.
In terms of the agile question also, we have multiple communities of practice. Now, one UX community of practice, and another one is the agile community of practice, and that is open to everybody. And we have monthly events we coordinate so that we don't have any events that same Thursday, but we also have monthly events that everyone is
Thanks everybody for coming. For those of you who haven't met me yet, I'm Joya, and I chair this community of practice. Very glad to see you. Just a quick raise of your hand if you heard about us for the HUIT, ABCD HUIT. Okay, so I'm glad to hear that because we're reaching more people, and that's our aim, is to just reach out across the university and bring project managers. We're trying to build this community. We do monthly events. Our next event is on April 13th. And I'll send this again out through the web. It's Marie Bamputi, who's a speaker, is coming to us, and the topic is conversational intelligence, navigating difficult conversation with results. So that may be something you're interested in. And, you know, we're always soliciting ideas. We're looking for new people to join our group. If you go to the HUIT PMO website, you can just Google it. There are communities of practice. One is Tamara's Agile community of practice, and one is this project management. You can join, subscribe to the list, and you'll get regular updates and invitations. Okay. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. And if you have any feedback for us, there's an attendance sheet, and we're just asking if there's anything you want us to do more of, would you let us know. Stick it out there and we'll share it. Thank you.